People engaged, it's time for Dueling Decades. The Matrix and Blade versus Bloodsport and Renegade. Strap on that cap, bust out the power glove. Come fight for what you love.
Dueling Decades.
Poop culture, popping pins, dropping hand grenades. Van Halen locked in Mortal Kombat with David Gray. Banner Ballet and Sick, Iron Maiden, GNR. Come fight for what you love.
Dueling Decades.
Broadcasting from the BioBidet Studios, where water does it better. Greetings, Retro Warriors, and welcome to another episode of Dueling Decades, the totally awesome retro game show where we make the 80s and 90s fight it out as we debate these two dope decades. On this special episode of our game, our very own Mega Powers explode as the Mamalukes face each other for the very first time in a one-on-one action movie duel. I am Mark James, and I will be battling tonight with action of 1995. And in the other corner, representing the action movies of 1985.
That would be me, I guess. Rick Man Crush.
And as always, here on our show, we need someone to hold down Law and Order. But who could we find to keep the peace in our very ever first singles duel? As a special guest referee for this episode is the man who might be the most polite judge we may ever have on our show. Put your hands together for Joe Finley, the host of Miscast Commentary, as tonight he is Judge Joe Finley.
Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so much for having me. And you say the Mega Powers explode. I feel a little bit like Miss Elizabeth.
Except you don't have to give anybody head on this episode.
Well, I don't have to.
Alrighty. Well, the rules of our game, they're pretty simple. A coin flip will decide the team that goes first. The winning team will decide the topic of each round out of the 5 Dueling Decades categories. Those being movies, TV, music, news, and of course, hot products. Although tonight's theme of action movies will be applied to all of the categories. The first 3 rounds are worth 1 point each, with rounds 4 and 5 worth 2 points apiece. The judge's ruling will determine who wins each round, and the person with the highest overall score after 5 rounds will be the victor. Gentlemen, let's play some Dueling Decades.
Let's do it. Let's do this coin toss.
Well, I've gone very high tech for you. I have acquired a coin flip app because I don't carry change on me. So we have it. I have an American penny here for you, which is worth 32 Canadian dollars. So, all right. Who wants to call this bad boy?
Let's go to Mark because Mark gave me 85. So let him flip.
All right, wonderful. Call it on the screen instead of in the air. You get it. Go.
All right, I'm calling tails.
It is tails. You've got the call, baby.
All right. Let's see. Where can we start out? You know what? Let's start out with hot products. That's a category we never start off with on this show.
All right, scary product. Let's hear about it.
All right, so for my first hot product of 1995 is going to be the Power Rangers toys from Bandai. They were put out in conjunction with the Power Rangers movie that was released that year. The movie came out on June 30th, 1995. And in doing some research for this, I found some pretty interesting articles. One that was dated Saturday, March 25th of 95. So just before the movie released. And it's talking about how Street Sharks may overtake Power Rangers as the new hot toy, and that it predicts that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers line has, although it has top sales for the last 2 years, it does predict that in this article it will be seeing its near end. But of course we know that was wrong, because once that movie came out, it did increase toy sales and became one of the top selling toy lines of that year, only to be outdone by what I have for my second entry for hot products. And that is in 1995, a movie was released called Batman Forever, featuring Val Kilmer as the Dark Knight. And they put out a toy line for that movie featuring Val Kilmer as Batman. They were all new sculpts of the Batman figures. The previous Batman lines kind of used the same molds. So for this one, they did all new sculptures of the figures, and they were really characters that represented what their movie likenesses were. Target eventually released their own series of exclusive Batman Forever action figures as well. And that they were just really repainted from the original line, but it was the original one that came out, the Batman Forever. It was the only way you could get Val Kilmer as an action figure at the time, dressed as Batman. The official line. What?
I was gonna say or ever, but nah. I think he did have one for Willow. So
yeah, the Matt Mardigan figure. That's what I was gonna say. It was the only other one other than the Matt Mardigan figure, but good luck finding that thing. So Batman Forever action figures overtaking the other previous leader, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers toys from 1995. That's what I got for Hut Products.
All right. Well, they definitely made their way to licensing in 1995, I see.
Yes.
In 1985, you want to talk about toys, we'll begin there. And we'll start with American Ninja toys.
Ooh.
So we're not talking Power Rangers. We're not talking Batman. But leave it to the cousins of Golan and Globus to market American Ninja action figures to kids by licensing to a shitty toy company called Fleetwood and having them rush out a line of American Ninja toys along with a blow dart target set, some kind of weird Halloween mask, a mini ninja blade and suction cup throwing star, and of course the generic ninja figure with player card, which had Joe across it. Now, of course, his name was Joe Armstrong, but everyone knows Mr. Dudikoff is just Joe, and that came out in 1985. But if you look up these things today, and the reason I put them on here, if you look on eBay, these go for like $400 or $500 to try to find these. They're pretty rare, and like I said, it was
$5.
$400 or $500.
Oh, okay, that sounds a little better there.
The comments like Batman and stuff like that was around and everybody bought it. Those ones you can find for $5 on eBay, but these ones were a little bit more rare. So $400 or $500, you can get your very own Joe toy.
Or you could go to the Dollar Tree and pick up your own replica of it for $1. Because they've knocked that toy off so many times.
Oh yeah, I mean, even this company Fleetwood was actually known to make these cheaper toys that would be sold at like a dollar store or whatever.
Right.
So that kind of does make sense. But if you looked at these toys on the back, it said American Ninja. It had Dudikoff on the top, even though the likeness is really not that close. But that's what they had. But then my second product. Now, bear with me for a second. When VHS players were introduced in 1975, the average VCR cost was like $1,000 to $1,400. All right. But in 1985, all those prices fell significantly and they dropped 15% by the summer of 85. And by year's end, you could typically find a VCR somewhere between $150 to $300. So that's $350 on the low end, $700 on the high end in 2019. So that's not too bad. And I'm only bringing this up because to point out the popularity of rentals and VHS sales at the time in 1985. 1985 was the year that all these things were starting to blow off and get more affordable and people were gobbling them up. So let me get to it now. You know, right around June 1985, roughly 7 months after it was released at theaters, Thorn EMI and HBO Home Video released The Terminator on VHS and beta, immediately catapulting it over Star Trek 3 and Gone with the Wind. If you look at any top 10 video cassette list from the 80s, Gone with the Wind's always in the top 10. A lot of times if it's a slow month, it was number one, but Terminator overtook it. It had a price tag of $80, which would be $191 in 2019. But even that being said, the Terminator became the top dog in the industry for rentals and sales.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that's a fantastic pick.
I like the a lot to consider here because we were kind of sticking in the toy realm, and I kind of had my thing, and then you threw me. You got me with this other hot product. I'm going to start with the 90s, and I'm going to say that the Batman Forever, I remember those figures, and I remember them being, because Batman Forever was so stylistically different, because switching over, obviously, from Tim Burton and having this whole thing, you had a whole new realm of toys, and like you said, the models were different and all this kind of different stuff. And I remember that very well. And of course, everybody remembers Power Rangers, their iconic toys, their 30-minute long commercials for said toys airing constantly. My only bang against it, I barely clock it in as a quote unquote action movie, as I consider it more of a kids family movie, but it's got kicking and sparks when you hit each other. So it clocks in, but it's kind of teetering on the edge. You go to the other side, and the American Ninja one, I was almost at American Ninja Warrior because that's just where my brain was going. But the American Ninja toy, okay, cool. It hits my heartstrings because of Joe. I remember American Ninja, the movie, very well. I don't remember the toys at all, but the whole reason that it would be a collectible now is because they just didn't make very many of them. I think that the hotness in comparison of toys between the 80s and the 90s, there's no comparison. There was way more in the 90s. Yeah, and that's just the way, because they learned how to market them then, and that's kind of a disadvantage, but tough but fair here. Then we start talking about, like VHS was a huge thing. And I remember, actually, I heard very recently a story on another podcast of somebody like borrowing money from everybody so they could get a Terminator VHS. Wow. And like they were borrowing money off their sister and saving up their allowance and doing all this stuff to buy it, as opposed to rent it or wait to buy it used or any of those different things. And they talked about wearing it out. So VHS, it blows my mind still. I can't wrap my head around a VHS costing that much money when you can get it for like negative $30 now, unless it's one of the big puffy white Disney like Disney classics, where those ones still have some collector's value. So where I am going to lean towards is just overall hotness. And I think while Terminator definitely was a very popular product and kind of helped revolutionize VHS as a viable home video thing, I have to go with what people were just piling into stores to buy, and I would lean towards the 90s with the Batman and the Power Rangers figures.
Oh, I can see that. As soon as you said Power Rangers, I just knew, and doing the research for this, I knew the licensing was still kind of at its infancy in 85. That's why you didn't see a whole lot of crazy releases. Like in the 90s, everything had a toy. Matter of fact, yesterday I bought a freaking Stargate Kurt Russell from 92 or something like that. Wow. Still in the package. That's so awesome. Like you're going to get these movies and everything had a toy line, Alien, everything. So yeah, I knew there was going to go that route. The only caveat, Mark, why the fuck did you go with that round one?
Why?
Oh man, that's a round two banger.
Yeah, I don't know. I was really worried with 80s and action, because I do remember there were some really great toys, but I wasn't sure if that was 85 or later in the 80s. But I think you were right about like what you were just saying. With the 80s, the licensing really hadn't come into play yet. Mm-hmm. And there were so many companies making toys and knockoff toys. And then I think by the time you got to the 80s, those companies, you just had 2 or 3 or 4, really big companies, and they were doing all the licensing. So it was kind of a different toy scene. And I think that's why some of those 80s ones are still so collectible.
Yeah, nobody was able to crack the Star Wars code. They kept trying and they kept trying, and that's why things like Masters of the Universe and all these different things kind of came into the realm, because nobody was figuring out how to make toys out of the other movies that came out. They tried and failed miserably time and time again.
So just like I did in this round.
Dueling Decades.